Hey guys, I'm Brittany,
I'm Maria.
and welcome to the Be More podcast.
Hi everyone. I'm peeling clementine. So I'll be eating my fruit.
Back on her vitamin C intake.
Yep. We didn't ask. Did we ask last week how or what are we feeling or whatever?
I don't think we did because we were so into wanting to talk about
Oh, your book. The book, I mean.
the book stuff. Um,
Mhm.
Such good things, but no, I don't think we did.
Okay, so what are you feeling?
Great, thanks. I'll go first. Hot, for sure.
Yeah, man.
It's interesting. Our bodies are so interesting, and this is why having gradual season change is so important because it is a whole lot on your body for it to be like 60 degrees one day and then it be close to 100 and really humid. Like my body is trying to process that, and it's really exhausting because being exposed to the heat for long periods of time is just not good for you. So that I'm feeling that. Um Today specifically, I definitely feel very calm, which is really nice. I have some anxieties around a bunch of things in my life, but I'm not worrying about them right now, so we're good. Uh, so yeah, that's where I'm at right now. What are you feeling this week or today, or what did you feel this week?
Indifferent. Like I'm just going with the flow. It's so fucking hot though.
I know it's terrible. Marie and I had mentioned really like quickly what we were going to talk about today, and one of the things that I think is just pertinent that we can talk about all the time is the fact that it's gotten to the point where when I ask my Alexa what the weather is in the morning, I'm like, yeah, well, how that changes in 10 seconds. And I don't think that people, like, as a society, as a race, we don't know what we don't know, but I don't think people are realizing how or will be able to realize how extremely detrimental our existence is going to be when we no longer can predict what's going to happen with the weather. Case in point is that there's so much going on right now with farmers and the major rainstorms that are coming and wiping out crops and the issues with flooding and the not being able to get the produce that we normally get. I mean, we've seen so much with the issue that we've been having with wheat across the country, and corn, which are two like the major in terms of the food that we manufacture. Those are two of the prime basic necessities used for our ecosystem when it comes to the food that we create. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just so damn hot. And like there was also tornado warnings in Jersey. Did you see that the other day?
Yes, those
And
are
I
fun.
was like,
Because the last
this
time we
sucks.
had one came up the major road that we
Mm-hmm.
live off of, which is very funny.
Mm-hmm.
No, we live in different towns, one major road, and one had come up the major road that we live on, and we had to like stay in. I was freaking out because this is not a thing that happens, and so we were like in the hallway for a solid 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It's
just,
crazy.
and I had said that to that day. It was funny because it was a day that there was a tornado warning and the weather changed like 12 times, and at that point in the day I was with one of my clients and it was sunny and really nice, and you never know anything was going to be going on later on in the day, and we were talking about how tornado warnings in New Jersey didn't exist,
When we were kids.
and she was confused by that. Like that wasn't a thing. Like she didn't know that was a thing that has happened, that or hadn't happened or has
Mm-hmm.
become concern now.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. And I was like, the like very scary thunderstorms that we get now too, with like the really intense lightning and thunder that feels like it's going to split the earth in half. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, that wasn't a thing either. Like we got thunderstorms, but they weren't to the extent of what's happening in the atmosphere and like the major struggles with temperature balancing in the atmosphere. Like that wasn't a thing.
Did you? This was now a couple weeks ago, a few weeks ago now. Did you wake up to that one
Yes.
clap of fucking thunder at
Yes.
6 a.m. or something?
Yes.
I was like, I woke up and like I'm a deep sleeper. You really can't wake me up that much, unless it's my alarm. But I woke up and I was like, the world ending?
Yeah.
And I went
And you
straight to
feel
sleep.
the
I was like,
earth shake.
I was like, if it is, good night. I'm going back
Yeah.
to sleep.
I'd rather be asleep when it happens.
It
Yeah,
was wild. We've never
those are
gotten that.
things that are not those are not normal, and that's why we're getting I would be very surprised if we didn't get a crazy storm later on today because this the just like it's difficult for our bodies to be able to regulate the temperature constantly changing, it's really difficult for these crazy changes to happen quickly in the atmosphere, and especially when we're dealing with intense humidity and intense heat. And this, I mean, the greenhouse effect is a thing for a reason, you guys. Like, our planet is its own greenhouse. And it just baffles me how people don't understand this. And it is truthfully the things that I'm afraid of for the future of society. If we don't kill each other first, and I kind of almost hope that we kill each other first, because what's going to happen to our planet, we're not going to survive. And I don't really think that people are grasping that. And I mean, we're talking about it's only been 30 years since we were kids. That is not a lot of time. So the changes that have happened and them have be so extreme and so intense
Mhm.
terrifies me in a way that I feel like we're not speaking about enough. So I'm not looking forward to what's to come in terms. I think our planet has every right to do what it does. I think our planet's really pissed at us. I don't think we served it well. And I'm very afraid of what's going to come to the future. And I hope that none of us have to be alive to see it because it is not going to go over well. The planet is going to rebirth itself however it needs to.
Without us.
Yeah, two farts about anybody that's living on it. It's trying to survive itself.
Um, I mean, there are a bunch of documentaries that you can probably watch about all this shit, obviously, but it's just
Mm.
like the politicians and the Fortune 500 companies that have the power to figure it out, but they
Yep.
just won't because of money.
Yep. And it's
So
well,
take
and
that
that's
as it
sad.
is.
It's that simple and it's that sad. And
Yeah,
honestly, circling back, the mass production connected to the farming industry and the way that we work with animals is a big part of the problem. Um,
overfishing.
also,
Overfishing is also a thing that like
yeah,
is affecting the ocean and like the temperature
the
from the ocean, and that
temperatures. Yeah,
typically regulates us, across
yeah.
the fucking globe.
It's amazing when you look at that chain of connection, how we really do in that sense of species that exist on the earth. We really do need each other. And humans have just been really, really good at cleaning house. um,
Uh-huh.
I,
There's that.
it's I get it, and I'm part of the problem. I know that, but it's just when you look at it on a greater scale, you're like, well, this sucks, and
There's nothing we can do.
that's
Like, and
something
an
that
individual level, it
right,
has to be a collective level. So
yeah,
like we can do as much eco-friendly living as we
yeah,
want, but like if you're like we're both in like complexes, like if you're like 10 other neighbors in the same building are not, then nothing's gonna happen. You know what I'm
right,
saying? Like so
yeah.
then expand that to the whole population, then
Yeah, you need it's with everything else we talk about, the systems that are at play that need to create a different
mhm.
experience, and they don't want to do that. And that's the fact that that's okay and continue to be allowed is just asinine.
Look, I mean, it got very political, even though it's supposed to be scientific, but like everything that's scientific got political. So like
There's no separation between church and state in any aspect at this point. Like that's the reality of the situation. There just isn't because the
yeah, we
government
can advertise it all we want, but like
those systems that are in place because of the government. It's just the way that it is. Speaking of the government, this is the other thing that I wanted to talk about today. The whole Roe versus Wade situation.
I mean, yeah, that and also the did you see them knock down the baby formula situation? How there's a
No,
baby
I know how
formula
there is an issue,
shortage?
but I don't actually know that. I don't know
Like
the
all the
reason as to why.
Republicans, so the Congress
Mm-hmm.
went in for a vote to like make a plan to correct it, and like a majority
To
of
deal with the
Republicans,
shortage, you mean?
yes,
Okay.
yes, and a majority of the Republicans said no. I'm like, so you knocked down Roe v. Wade, but then are
So
making
you're gonna
people have babies, and yet you won't care for the babies, which is not pro-life, but that's fine, I guess.
What I don't know enough about the issue that caused the. I know there is a shortage, but I don't know anything about why.
Oh, I have no idea, to be quite honest with you. I just know that there is one, because one of my friends just had a baby and she's like dealing with it. Um, but I haven't looked into it myself, to be quite honest with you. Are you gonna Google it right now?
Apparently, this is my initial Google search, but apparently
Yeah.
the STEM issue is that there was a recall on product for God knows what reason.
Oh my God, our baby formula.
A shortage, and now they're saying that I mean the supply chain, our country's supply chain in general is apparently extremely fragile right now.
Oh yeah, from the pandemic, it's been.
Right. So they're relating it and saying that cause is connected to that as well. But I don't even want to know why it was recalled. I can only imagine why it was recalled.
I don't want to know.
That situation is just how you cannot be any more hypocritical. You can't be more of a hypocrite. You can't be more full of shit than to say, we're going to make you have kids. We're going to try to push you to have children and bear children and not give you the resources that you need to support those kids. Like,
I like So let's go from the beginning, aka Roe v. Wade, if you
these are
wanted
just
to.
the moments that
Because I'm sure I
just
can.
make me think like this isn't real. Like
Yeah,
this
we're
is
just living in
when
a
I think to
simulation.
myself, right, that we have to somebody has to be playing this game. It
Like
can't
someone's
be
playing a really bad game of Sims right now, and it's really pissing me off.
really.
Um, so Roe v. Wade was over, not officially, but for the people that aren't aware, there was a draft
I
opinion
just
from the
can't.
Supreme Court stating that they would overturn Roe v. Wade, I believe is the exact terminology. A draft opinion does not mean that they actually made the opinion yet. It's literally just in draft
Where they
form,
currently stand.
which more or less will be where they stand.
Right. Unless something absolutely drastic happens.
And it's not going to drastically
Not
happen because
likely.
even with this backlash, like the Supreme Court hasn't done anything, so they're going to go through with
Yeah,
it.
and they don't care.
And it's funny because like I know people online that are not democratic will be like, this is happening under your presidency, but like the people that are in the Supreme Court are from the prior
You
presidency, so
clearly
you
don't know
did
anything
this.
about how the government works, so you're not allowed to be a part of the conversation.
Exactly, but like those people that will just on face value be like this is under the
Yeah.
Biden presidency, like this sucks, but like it's not like there's a whole like like this is why Supreme Court justice appointments are so important because they go on for
Right.
decades, for fucking
And this is
decades.
also a perfect example of how, like, you're right. We do have a Democratic president in office right now, and look how that's not making a difference. Like, the president is the head of the snake, and there are a lot of other things that come into play that cause the movement of the head of the snake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like he has supreme power. Like people,
Right.
I don't know why people think that the president has like supreme power to
I
like
don't,
do everything when
it's
really you
not
should
that
be
hard to know that there's a difference between a democracy and a dictatorship.
right. But it's always like he's like the face of the government, but also like the
Correct.
Congress, the people that you vote in for Congress
He
are
is
more
the
important.
right. He is the public figure. And if anybody made that right old crystal clear, it should have been Trump. So clearly you weren't paying attention when the person that you wanted to be president was president also.
Well,
This
they
is
also
becoming
think
a
that he's
very
still
intensely
president.
democratic, a very intensely political conversation out of nowhere. But I guess that's where we are today, guys.
Well, it's very political. It's Roe v.
You want to
Wade,
know
right?
what? In the world that we're living in right now, like this is the shit that's happening that is going to affect us for the rest of our lives. So maybe we should talk about it more.
I also just don't like. I don't get overturning Roe v. Wade and then go like same like with the baby formula thing.
The
They're making people have children, but then won't help them
the
take
thing
care of
that
these
makes
children.
me
It's sickening.
the most uncomfortable with this situation is that if I'm gonna say if because hopefully it means there's still hope. If this happens, this will be the first time that we'll be taking action in doing something of this nature that's going to be taking away things from people instead of giving to the people.
And it's not like being women. We have a lot anyway.
No, and we don't. That's 100% true. So that is the concern for me is that And of course, right, if they're going to make any decisions, remember how I told you, it's interesting, the last conversation we had, that we were talking about the things that people were passionate about and the things that scare us. And I was mentioning to you how, like, all the stuff around, like, female empowerment and female
Mm-hmm.
women's rights were, like, head of iceberg for me. Um, it makes you realize, first and foremost, how if something is going to change and be for the worse, and they're going to take away rights from people, they're easily going to take them away from women, which means how fragile is that? Isn't that makes my stomach turn?
Because we're still a minority in the government, right? Like it's still like
Right.
unfortunately a thing.
Yeah.
And even the people, even the women that are in government, um, Republican wise, will vote with their party, which I think is baffling to me. And that as a woman, that you're this repressed.
Yeah. Which is just speaks to the issue
But
at hand
it's
to
also
begin
just
with, right?
like it's also just like organized religion, but like a particular organized religion
I just
that like is doing this. And I don't understand why, when we're supposed to be again uh separate church and state, but clearly that's not happening because like
that
you're
never
telling me,
happened. I think that was bullshit from the get-go, just to say.
oh well,
Just to
it's hard
religions were
because
created to control people where
it's so
government
hard if
called.
you're a political person to like set that aside if you're so into that part of your life, right? If you're,
Okay, I understand that. But
but
does
also like it
your
shouldn't
religious
be
practice also govern the way you live?
for most people. I mean, for people like this, apparently it does. Like, but like then you really shouldn't be a political
Correct. If
person.
you don't have the ability to have discernment, then
But it comes to the voters, right? It comes to like, okay, then the voters that are voting you in clearly are living the same way,
right.
or the people in your constituency aren't even voting, so you're just being,
Also, right.
yeah.
I
People are
don't.
voting the wrong election. This is my argument every like 2 years.
Yeah,
I'm like, you're voting in the
you're
wrong
not
election.
wrong.
Vote in your
And we
congressional one.
actually in New Jersey we have an election coming up, so
Yes.
and
Yes.
please get on that. I think it's the 7th of June is the actual day to vote, but you can already send in your ballots. Please do so.
Yeah. And like, New Jersey though is safe,
Just to
thankfully.
clarify, we're talking about Catholicism. Are we not talking
No,
about?
I mean, yes, yeah. We're talking
Just to
about,
put that
well,
out there for
I'm talking
everybody
about
else who wasn't following the train of thought, because
Christianity.
if you look at, if you look,
I think it's Christianity. I don't think it's just Roman Catholicism.
okay, I see where you're coming from. You're right. All of
Because I don't know every congressional person's
necessarily a Catholic. I
yeah,
get
yeah, yeah.
it. Christianity so much is tied to the Bible, right?
Repressing women.
And exactly, if you look at the stories of the Bible, and that's what they
I will.
their stories,
It's a book.
like all of human existence, right? We tell stories. Um, you see nothing but constant themes of and like the concern. I mean, honestly, the first fucking story of Adam and Eve, not to be trusted. They're always going to stab you in the back. They're going to betray you. They're going to be mischievous. They're going to be manipulative. Like, you can't trust women. So, I mean, nothing else after that story even matters at this point. All you have to do is read the first couple chapters, friends, at the beginning.
I also think it's just like people's interpretation of the Bible.
Mm.
Because then it goes every which way. And also, like, if I can bet you, though, I can bet you none of those people that are Christian in like government have read the Bible
Actually
through
read
and through.
it.
They're picking pieces that they've heard on in headlines and discussion points that they're like,
I will
yeah, I
tell
agree.
you that, and I was just having this conversation with my husband, that I've gotten to the point of my life where if everyone else is going to cherry pick things for convenience, I'm going to start cherry picking the hell out of stuff too.
I think it's stupid. I think
Because,
you're just,
and it's not, and I don't mean that in the way of like I'm going to choose to be ignorant and just cherry pick, but like when people start throwing and blowing bullshit at me, I'm just going to be like, okay,
okay, bye.
and leave the rest, because it's amazing how those major systems that have huge influence on the way that our society runs and the way that people interact and engage with one of us
Uh-huh.
so easily be bent to the will of whoever's spewing them out
Yeah, I don't.
like that. I don't I don't understand.
It's
Like,
just everything is just a hypocritical when it comes out of their mouths, though. Like
right,
that's the
and it's
issue, right? Like
all
that's the core
open to
issue.
interpretation, and that's the thing. It's like if it's open to interpretation for you, then it's open to interpretation for everybody. And what makes you think that you get to play the role of
God,
God and set a standard?
but that's what they're doing, right? With making you
Correct.
have children.
Correct.
I don't want children, so I therefore, if it ever happens, even though I am Catholic, I'm not having a child.
Right.
Like that's a choice that I get to make.
And then it leads to what so many people have been bringing to light too, is that just because you make legal abortions inaccessible,
Oh, unsafe ones are
in
gonna
that
happen.
right, and then you're just creating more of a health crisis, and then it becomes the question of
This has happened in the past, though. Like
right, we're
this has
redoing this
we're
is exactly this is
this is
what
the history that we're supposed to be learning from.
and the question becomes, is that what you want? That's what you want to know, what like my little conspiracy theory is on this, and I'm thinking of this right now. If you give women, I honestly, I like it is a women's, I like it's so, I don't really know how to navigate this concept of women's rights with the conversation around transgender, like because it is a
Oh,
biological issue. So I feel, you know what I mean? Like I feel like that's a, I need to learn more about that. I don't know,
I don't know the terminology, unfortunately.
necessarily an area that needs to be more inclusive, because
Mm-hmm.
really speaking to biology, it's really speaking to like you have a uterus. If I'm
Yes.
about this, somebody please tell me.
Yeah. Please.
That's something that's on my brain while I'm thinking about this. But all around women's rights, my this is sad, but this wouldn't surprise me at all. If all of this was just a major manipulation to like keep women distracted, like
Mm-hmm.
we're fighting for something and we're angry about something and we're trying to take action around this issue, what is it keeping us from?
Oh, is that your theory? That something
It's
else
just
is
something
happening?
I'm, yeah, that there's like,
There's
you
always
know,
something
like
happening. No, yeah, I
that,
mean,
is it, are they trying to, because if you think about,
I think this is just like the first like snowball effect.
yeah, and I think it's a response, I think it's a fear response to the fact that women empowerment has become such a big thing. And I think it's a place, I think it's a really fucked up moment to be like, well, you know what? You feel so empowered and you're coming after, you've been, I mean, look at the past 10 years, right? We've
Yeah.
been calling white men out, we've been calling men out in general, we've been calling the systems out that have allowed all of these actions, these detrimental things towards women and oppression and suppression towards women to be dealt with and be fixed and be managed. So, what's a better way to put a woman in her place or distract her from fighting those issues by taking away some of her basic human rights?
But why are you taking away rights? Like, why? What is the soul like? So
Because they're afraid of women.
you have countries across the globe that are like, Spain just passed like you can have 3 days off if you have menstrual cramps, no questions asked. Like then you have like things like that, and like abortion is legal, and like you know periods aren't like a fucking stigma to talk about. Like, and like your whole reproductive system is not a stigma to talk about, and
Did
yet
you watch the? I don't know if I sent this to you. There's a Netflix little docu series that came out around pleasure. Did you watch? Have you watched it? Have you heard?
physical, what's it called, do you remember?
I think it's literally called Pleasure.
Okay.
Something else after that. I'll look it up real quick. But it talks about sexual pleasure for women, but it talks about all things related to like reproductive systems and sex and stuff for women. I learned more in those in those little series episodes than I did throughout our entire like throughout any type of like sexual health
Education.
education that I ever got. Um,
Well, because also our education system is shit.
it's called The Principles of Pleasure. It's amazing. Everyone needs to watch it. It's literally about, it says the little like info line says sex, joy, and modern science converge in a celebration of women's pleasure and put stubborn myths to rest. It is 10 out of 10 wonderful. I sat there and was like, oh my gosh.
Interesting, I'll have to watch it.
It's
um
very, very good.
I just like, why are you politicizing other people's bodies?
Why are you politicizing my uterus? I'm not a factory. Leave me alone. You don't get a say of whether we're open or closed.
I think the most concerning thing is literally when women are for this. I think that is the most concerning thing for
I
me.
haven't even thought about that, and that makes me unsettled.
Because like, so you're telling me you don't get the patriarchy.
What are the arguments behind that? Do we know?
That for like Roe v. Wade and all this stuff, it's like
Mm.
I think it's more the Christian route. Like you're killing babies. You're murderers. Like you guys cannot murder a child because the Bible said so. Because
Okay.
life starts at whatever.
So what happens when you cut down trees to put up your church in the Midwest?
Oh, but
You're not
you
taking
know
life
that
away then?
they're not
Or
considering
what happens
anything
when
natural like nature in
what
the same
happens
vein.
when a squirrel like has a bunch of babies in your attic and you smokehouse them out? Those life don't.
You know that doesn't count.
I'm double-edged sorting this
I
right.
know, but
Such
like you know
like
that they'd
I'm
be like they're
trying to
and
clear the smoke of how much bullshit this is
their retort for that would be like that doesn't count. They're not
because they
the
don't have
supreme.
emotional intelligence
Yes,
like the
yeah,
humans do.
yeah. Like
But then
God
at the
wasn't talking
same
about in the Bible.
that's the same thing, right? Then it all comes back to this. You don't get to play God. You don't get to
Yeah.
interpret God's word. You are not God.
Also,
You have a connection to be able to learn.
not everyone is reading the Bible.
That's
Not everyone's reading the Bible.
that is so true.
There are so many people that don't have organized religion now. Like
I don't understand the like the interpreting as rule and being able to I just don't I really I'm so over people inflicting their authority on other people for the sense of government and religious practice. I'm over it. Like you just no. When you don't get that right, you don't have that power. I can understand wanting to share I can understand wanting to share religious practice as a form of creating peace and love and harmony and sharing light and helping people find community. Great, good, do all that. I can understand government as being able to create systems that support the ongoing of a society. Great. Anything other than that, sit down.
also like I don't understand like the whole you can have an abortion, but like what if the mom cannot physically have the kid? Like you are
Right.
making her go through a whole term
There were
and
a
she
couple of
is gonna
stories that came
die
out about women who had gone through processes like that who were sharing their story who had to have abortions. I mean, like
because they couldn't.
I'm a perfect example in my current state right now. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that would go right down this whole rabbit hole of removing all of these things from being possible. But I'm somebody who has an IUD. So for people who don't know what those are, it's like it's literally an interuterus device. I have that little guy inside of my uterus. If I were to get pregnant, it would like 90% chance kill me and my child. So
Mm-hmm.
in that type of situation, it's like that. I
But and yet
thing.
thankfully we live in New Jersey, so abortion is legal here in state. Like thankfully, like the
Yeah.
overturning of Roe v. Wade will be a federal, but each
Right.
state,
Right.
and this is the
Gets to
concern.
decide.
This is the concern.
Right.
Each state will have to decide whether or not to
Right.
follow, because like that's how our government works here in America.
Yeah.
And
Thank goodness.
it is the states that will completely ban abortions. And then like for example, like Texas, right? Because you know they are going to,
Mm.
or like Utah or whatever one of these states. They're gonna like if you even have an inkling of a thought of getting an abortion, you are going to jail. Do you hear about this?
No.
Like if they find your
This is
IP
so
address,
Big Brother.
no, literally, it's in
This is
1984 or
so
whatever.
Big Brother.
So even like apparently like if you Google search something relating to that, you're fucked. If
So
you
we want to know what's going to be the thing that's going to make, and this is going to be the
I
sad.
think the Louisiana Purchase was the worst purchase in American history.
The
This boils down to this. This is the pivotal moment in American history where
what's
it should
going to
have
end up
stopped.
happening, and it's going to be so sad, is that this is going to be reality for young women in these states. If this happens, going to keep that it there. 5-10 years from now, we're going to watch these things happen, and we're going to watch these women get like I don't know why my brain went right to the Handmaid's Tale, and I just like picture all of these.
I watched one episode of that just to like because I've never watched it and I got sick. I was like, I'm not watching this.
Talk
I'm
about
not watching this.
just, I mean, I highly encourage you to watch it because it is
Oh,
enraging in all of the right
that's why
ways.
I stopped watching the first episode. I
But
was like, I can't do this.
I can see those states who make it illegal creating some type of environment where it's allowed to. So if you're not familiar with The Handmaid's Tale, the only thing that you have to know is that if you're a woman who doesn't do what you're supposed to do, you're hung. So I can completely see these poor young women being forced to complete term in being able to have their child and then being like murdered in front of people for the sake of making a point. And you want to know why I see it this way? It's because this is what a lot of these countries were, again, just rewriting history, just creating a new victim. This is literally what countries did. These states did to people of color who didn't listen or follow the rules that they set. So
There's that.
there's that. Full circle. And you know that the ones that are going to be the most harshly accused and the most harshly punished for any of these types of acts are going to be the women of color.
100%.
Why would that change? And the women who come from lower socioeconomic
Hmm.
status who happen to be white will also probably, but not to the extent that women of color will be. And
Right.
you will never hear about will be the women who are white and come from money and families can cover it up. So pretty much nothing's going to change.
It's just now
We're
explicitly
going to
said
see
if they're
some,
overturning
right,
things.
correct.
Oh my god, I can't deal with this. It's so stupid. I
I
we're focusing on the wrong things. We started off like talking about like climate change. We should be focusing on that. And yet it's like, please let me live my own life with my own body. Thank
the more we're talking about this conversation, the
you.
deeper we dive into sewing threads, the more as just wild as it is, the more that my brain is thinking the theory of they're mad that women have been able to do so much that they've been able to do over the last decade, and someone is like, well, let's pull these strings and pull back, and all of this is based on some white men sitting somewhere who are afraid of women. And you want to know what? If you happen to, not that you would ever come across this podcast, but be afraid because you're just going to piss a lot of women off. And when you give an inch to a woman, she's going to find out how to strategically make it a mile. And you're just going to piss off a lot of women. And we're not like men. We don't bow down, we don't back down. We're more intelligently strategic. And we're going to find a way to really fuck some shit up if this happens. Another reason for you to watch The Handmaid's Tale. Oh,
I'll try and give it a shot. It just freaked me
it
the
is.
fuck out though.
It
It
is
was so
because it's
creepy.
too close to home.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, this is too creepy. I don't like
It's
this
too
at all.
close to home. It's so. I mean, clearly we're at the point where women's empowerment is unfortunately that fragile in our country right now. And but there are parts of it that you watch and you're like, fuck yeah. So I highly encourage if you anybody hasn't. They're supposed to be coming out with the last season soon. And
Oh, okay.
if you are female and you identify as female and you especially if you have a uterus, um ooh, I highly encourage.
Oh, good to know. Maybe I'll try and watch it again. It was just so creepy. It's so like,
It
ugh.
is. It's very. It's disturbing. It's another. It is a 1984 Big Brother specific towards women's rights.
And this is so off topic, but right now I'm watching on Hulu Under the Banner of Heaven. Have you seen that pop up on like ads and stuff
I have seen the ads, but I'm not. I don't
with
know.
Andrew Garfield? So good. It's 6 episodes. We're five, 4, 5, or whatever, 8 episodes deep, and we're 5 or 6 episodes in or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, it's about the Mormon Church, and that's creepy.
I knew it was related to religion, but I wasn't sure what religion it was.
Like Utah, like they're in
Whoa.
Utah, like Salt. I don't know if Salt Lake City, but like Utah. So that's another instance of like just religion, getting into government through like and like true crime and all that stuff. It's
I
fucking
don't.
wild. There's so many of it, and it's funny because like there's so many of these like limited series, like or like TV shows and documentaries that like with a critical mind, you can critically think. Like there's a common thread.
There's something going on.
There's
Yeah.
something going on here, and yet people
It's
refuse to believe that.
it's identity, right? If anything else was able to get into these kids and these people's minds, I mean, think about the first, like that's one of the first things that you consistently learn to build habit around and build identity around. It's religion.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that you get to see and mimic and mirror in the people that you live with. And if those people that you live with and are your family members and their habits and identity are deeply rooted in their religious practices, you don't have a choice. And like, I'm sorry, but there is no truer form of brainwashing because you literally can't even, and I don't mean just with religious practice, I mean programming in general. You are not old enough to be able to have your own critical thinking, problem solving skills or interpret information and make your own decisions on it. You are just going to follow the path that has been laid out in front of you. And hopefully one day, like Maria and I have had our own ways of doing this. You look at where you've come from and go, wait, what the fuck? I don't even remember walking those steps. And you try to figure it out for yourself. And for so many people that are in those states where what their day in and day out things are the same, week by week, month by month, day by like, and people around you are the same, the communities are the same, what in God's name would make them stop and go, wait a second?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and it's just like it boils down to like in America, like there are 50 different countries here. Like
We really are. We
like,
are.
and it's so hard to get on one page, which is why the states have different laws compared to the federal. It's just like the federal one is a guideline. So, because you can't tell me that us versus not versus, but compared to Utah, we're not governing the same.
Oh no. I mean, and we shouldn't be because I understand in that respect the state's intent is to serve the people who live
That
within
they live there, that live there.
right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And I mean, look at our populace versus the populace that you would find in
Like the
Utah.
Midwest or something. Yeah.
It's not surprising.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the problem.
Yeah, correct. There's too
No
many different
exposure, there is
populations.
no there is no varying culture. There's none of that. So
It's the coastal areas versus the landlocked ones, like in the
it,
middle of the,
yeah, it makes sense. I understand why
Yeah.
we are the way we are, but it's an explanation, but it's not an excuse for you to continue to act like no one else exists. Like I'm just a that's just to say it like
Yeah, like in a not a perfect world, but like a closer to whatever perfect is world in America, the federal government would be just very neutral
right.
and not polarizing. And then the state governments would be, okay, well, this is what my populace is.
Yeah.
So let's protect them.
And I feel
And if you
like
don't like it, then go move to another state.
when you look at the federal government, right, they're the overseeing body that comes into play with a lot of the protection of the people of this country, right?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
that should be your job. You should have a boundary there that makes sure that nothing is happening to harm the people of this country, which I mean, look at all of the isms that exist in our country. That job is not being upheld because exactly what you said, they're not neutral. That's not their mission. That's not where the values lie. The values are like bent to the will of whoever happens to be handing somebody money on that certain day, I'm sure. But it's never going to be that perfect situation if that's not possible, because then we wouldn't be having this conversation about Roe versus Wade. You wouldn't allow someone who is physically not well enough to term with a child be put in a situation where that could be their reality, because then that's you not protecting the life of one of your citizens.
Which I don't understand why that's not clicking.
I mean, it
Like,
came
I
out
just
as a
want to.
sentence. That was one of the most clear, not multiple comma sentences that I've made in a very long time.
Because,
Because I
like,
could get through it and figure it out. Come on, guys.
I would love to just have a conversation. But here's the thing, right? Like, emotions would obviously play into a conversation of like a pro life versus a pro choice person. But like, I just want to have a conversation to get their understanding of what they deem is correct. You know what I'm saying? I just need to know. With anything that's like opposing my opinion, I just need to know why.
So
Not
it's
that I'm not that there's gonna be a productive conversation behind it.
right.
I just need to know
And there's
why.
always going to be the emotion that there's going. And here's like a perfect example. So I have someone who's like in my extended family that I love dearly had made a comment about, again, love them, also like very, very different generations, and had brought up that they feel uncomfortable about how, in terms of the way that like commercials and like media have been trying to bring more representation of people of color, that they felt like they become a minority. And
Sorry.
I know, that was my response too. And I I'm 100% relate to like the emotions run high, because I was like, I on the inside, and it's very difficult when it's somebody that you love, right?
Oh, they're the most difficult conversation because
But
then they're like, "Why are you attacking me?" You know, it
I was
gets
like,
to like defensive.
I
Yeah.
was, I again, and I told him, I was like, I understand where you're coming from, because you grew up with this being the norm. You were always the majority. I was like, I think the first thing that I said was like, it's not possible for you to be a minority. The system was literally built based on you being a majority. But like, again, not a lot of political understanding. So, but I had to go, I went through a couple of things, and I was like, what you're feeling right now is literally what white fragility is. And had to
Here's a book.
explain all of that. And then I was like, I'm not trying to tell you you're not allowed to have these feelings, but you also need to acknowledge the fact that you are feeling this now. And we went into like this conversation, and I could tell like a little discomfort, but I could feel myself being like, if you're, I think one of the last things that I said is like, if you're uncomfortable, then we're actually taking steps in the right direction. But emotions do run high if you're somebody who isn't directly affected or any type of ally in this, and you're working against, whether it's, you know,
Uh-huh.
anti-racism action, anti-climate change action, anti-sexist action, anti anything that ends in ism or is affecting our,
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
action, and you're talking with anybody whose identity is feeling, because that's what this situation was, right? Their identity was really feeling
Compromised in
right.
some
Thank you.
way.
That's a perfect word.
Yeah.
How, and we talk about this in circles on this podcast so much, because this is the important thing that I think we all need to remember when we come into these conversations, is that all of these things are somehow tapping into someone's identity and shaking that identity in the way that they're represented in our world. And it doesn't make it fun. And I agree with you about wanting to have a conversation with somebody around this issue, but this issue, I don't know how I would do. I don't
just
know if I would be able to keep.
Oh no, I don't know. I would not be strong enough to like me with my anger issues.
It
I
would
would not
not,
be strong enough.
it would not
Period.
be able to end with let's agree to disagree, because I couldn't.
I couldn't fathom.
And it comes down to your choices, your act. I mean, and again, I would be way more nonchalant about it if I knew it was a person who wasn't like actively voting, right? Who like didn't make any act, who talked whatever talk they wanted to, but didn't
Those
act,
are the worst type of people. They talk their talk, but then don't vote.
right. But I mean, if you're gonna do it, be a person who's on that side of the situation.
Yeah.
But if it was somebody that I knew who was actively like involved in making sure that steps for pro-life were happening, I would, ooh, that
Yeah,
would
because I
success for
mean,
sure.
I'm sure there are a lot of YouTube interviews and YouTube whatever and documentaries on like people that have spoken about pro life issues that like would probably give me the better understanding of why they think this way.
Yeah.
But like actually having conversation with someone is so much different.
And my
Because you can see
brain,
their brain turning.
right, my logistical brain again would come back to the idea of, okay, well, this explains why you are this way, but this is not an excuse for you to take action that's going to harm other people. And that would be,
And then their
in
reaction
my
to
head.
that would determine the course of the
Correct.
conversation. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that, just because you are this way, and I don't want to say doesn't make it right, but just because you are this way doesn't give you the excuse to want to inflict harm on other people through your actions.
Correct, because like what you're ultimately doing as a person that's very pro-life is that you're harming
Other people.
other people, which is not of the Bible.
And why do you think, this is like a general question, why do you think that you are making the best choice for the person who is going to be born, especially if the situation that you're having them be born into is where there's a shortage
Of baby formula.
formula and lower access to the resources needed to help them live a fulfilled and healthy life? Because I
Because
understand
they're not truly pro-life.
wanting to giving them the choice. Right. I understand your intent in wanting to give them a choice to have access to a life. But in all honesty, take a look around at the world and take a look around at the average life of an adult. Things aren't exactly happy and great. And like, this isn't a nirvana. Like, you're birthing this child without its own choice into the likelihood of it being the not greatest situation and it being a struggle for them to exist. Why do you get to make that decision?
Wasn't also a very early argument for pro-life was that like this kid might cure cancer. I'm like, that's like, but
Yep.
again, to your point, okay, if this kid might cure cancer, this kid is probably being born into a low socioeconomic status anyway. So what are the chances? And I'm not saying like people from low like socioeconomical
And
statuses
again,
haven't risen to the,
you are still
test.
trying to step into the role of trying to play God by making
Yeah.
an accusation. And
So then
you get to do that.
because like if that's your argument, right? If that's the early argument of pro-life and some people still are, this kid might be the next whatever, are you giving them the opportunity to become that next person?
Right. Are you going to look at the board
Because
and be
you're
like, here's
not.
everything you need to do this?
Because you're not, because education system isn't like the best in the world.
Just,
Like
yeah.
the socioeconomic system, like middle class, lower middle class people are not getting the benefit of like.
But I feel like the way to like completely like blow up that argument is like, well, if God wants that child to be born and if God wants cancer to be cured, like God will make it happen.
Period.
Conversation over.
Because
And
your God, yeah, your God is it's it's destiny or whatever. Like
right,
it's already
like
set in stone.
so
Oh my
I
God.
can't
Yeah.
I love understanding and knowing religion as a and
Non-religious person.
to use against people
Yeah.
who want to use who again who want to bend these rules to their own will. Um, I then that's this is how I constantly, and again I do agree with you that it is primarily around Christianity. This is how I constantly poke holes in religious
Yeah.
practice and why I have so much blocking me from a clear path of being able to walk up and be like, I am okay and at peace with this whole situation. I think that we are in we are in a beautifully and tragically fragile state in our society right now. Beautiful in the fact that we're trying to dismantle things that have existed for too long to cause harm to other people, but also very scary in the fact that it's making us realize how easy it is for all of the threads that have been sewn together to be easily pulled apart again.
And there's a TikTok. Of course, I get everything from TikTok. From a person that immigrated here, like from Europe or something, I think. She was like a white woman. She's like, I'm sorry that I'm not like a smart American. She's making fun of America, obviously. She's like, I'm sorry I'm not like a very smart American. Like, I'm just a dumb foreigner that moved over here. Like, but why is it that you guys are governing with a piece of paper that's like 300 years old now? And I'm like, damn, you know what? You ask our government. Like that's what that boils down to, right? Like also
Yeah.
like that's the other thing is like our founding fathers, blah 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 blah. I'm like, our founding fathers not people of color were not people. So I don't know what you're fucking talking about, girl. Like
Yep. Yep.
so again, there's different threads into all these conversations that we're having that are intertwined and just like it's
All
a
of that
mess.
fragility there on both ends.
It's a mess. It comes down to white fragility.
Right. It does.
Because even the most like asinine things. So like, there's this movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, right? With the Asian American. We can talk about this movie actually, but like,
yes.
yeah. But it's about multiverse. Doctor Strange came out, Marvel, white lead, white movie, whatever. All of a sudden, there are arguments saying Doctor Strange grossed more in the box office compared to Everything Ever All at Once, which is an indie film. And all the people are like, you can, and like they were saying Doctor Strange was a much better multiverse movie because it
First of all, I don't agree. I didn't even see the other one, and I thought Doctor
you
Strange.
should can we watch it?
Yes, we can watch it together, and I'll do.
I literally watched it a second
commentary
time
on it.
yesterday. So
But
I
also,
watched it
how are
3
you
times.
making comparisons between a movie that has
Thank you.
by Disney and Marvel?
Thank you. But white versus Asian American representation. The cast is all Asian Americans. Also, Everything Everywhere is much better multiverse. I haven't seen Doctor Strange, but I will tell you this.
The trailers that I've seen, it has a really cool play connection to reality, right? Like an interesting.
If you talk to any
that happens in Doctor Strange is completely
talk to any Asian American kid, like with immigrant parents, any one of them that has seen Everything Everywhere, you will know that I cried for 20 minutes during that movie. Everyone cried because every trauma imaginable being an Asian American kid was in that movie, but also played into the multiverse really well. Like it was never like it was such a unique concept of how a multiverse would exist that I was like, this is fucking unique that I highly doubt that Doctor Strange was better. But white fragility. They saw something, box office hit, and then, they went to Doctor Strange and was like, this is better because it grossed more. I'm like, that doesn't mean anything.
None of this argument is embarrassing.
But as things like asinine is like stupid things like this same thing, right? It can go from like movies that we all watch to Roe v. Wade.
Correct.
So.
Damn, that was a lot. Well,
that was a lot.
Very intense episode. But I think intensity. I took the skull off my little anatomy guy, and now I can't get it back on. Okay. Side note. This is an intense conversation, but I think a necessary intense conversation. I think more of these conversations need to happen, and I agree with you in the fact that we should be trying to have these conversations with people who. I think the good thing about the two of us is that we bring very different perspectives to a lot of we might have similar arguments, but we bring very different perspectives to the conversations that we have, obviously, for a whole plethora of reasons. I think it would be great if we could have somebody on here who had different arguments than us, willing to do that. And I don't mean that, it would never be a situation of like.
It would be hostile.
For us. We would do our best to behave ourselves, but I think I can, like, I'm ready for those conversations. How do you feel?
I'm just very curious. Again, obviously on recorded, I'm not gonna be hostile. I just want to know. No. If anything, I'm more curious than like very defensive.
Yeah, I get it.
And like I just hope, and we've had this conversation before, like on here. I just hope the same thing. Like I'm curious. That's all I'm not gonna be defensive. Like you do you. At the end of the day, like we're gonna part ways and we'll have our different opinions. End of story.
And the world will continue to revolve
around something.
Well, I hope that if you're somebody who is listening to this, that either you gained a new perspective today, or you got thinking about something that you weren't thinking about in connection to climate change, sexism,
all the isms,
white privilege, supremacy, all those things that are related to religion and government. And that if you're somebody who is interested in continuing the conversation because you have either a different perspective or a different argument on these topics, we would love to have you join us. I have no idea how I would tie this into the closing lines because so many things covered today, but thanks for joining us and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Okay, bye.